Hi, how are you guys all doing today? Hope you're all well and healthy and um, ready to get going. So today I figured I would show you how to set up your own bone broth. Bone broth is just what the name implies, a broth made out of bone. You also add some vegetables and things like that. Hi, Howard. Glad you could join. Hi, Mark. So I just wanted to kind of go through some of the basics and let you, get a firsthand glimpse of what I do. First things first, you want to have your oven preheated because what I do is I roast my vegetables and my bones for about 30 minutes. It really helps increase the flavor, which, whether you drink it cold or warm or whatever, you really do want a good flavor. Now, bone broth has a lot of benefits health-wise. From everything, here, I'll just read you a list I've compiled. Hi, Laura. So it's helpful for your joints, the collagen and gelatin in it. Oh, yay, you're inviting your daughter. Hi. Sorry, I'm trying to multitask and read what you're writing at the same time. It's also helpful for gut inflammation, arthritis, sleep aid. It can help with weight loss. We use it a lot when people are sick in our house. It has a lot of benefits as far as aiding your body to fight off viruses and bacteria. So whether it be stomach flu or a cold, we tend to feed up on it. Let me turn the camera and I'll just give you a glimpse of what I have set up here. Oh, how do we do this? Sorry, it's different on my phone than it is on my computer. Ignore the fabric mess. I'm making masks and hats for nurses at the hospital. So, and that's my dog grumbling. You gotta move out of the way, Daisy. Okay, so here, I just wanted to kind of show you, these are my two big canners, or not canners, but stock pots that I use to make bone broth. Now, when I set up bone broth, like I told you before, I don't do small batches. Number one, I don't have time to keep doing things over and over repetitively. So I do a big batch to get it done. I want to show you, these are two of the different broths that I have in my pantry currently that we're going to be adding to. So this is my turkey bone broth, and I have it both in 1 quart and pint jars. Pint jars are awesome for single servings. I tend to use small necks or small mouths for bone broth just because liquid pours easier out of a smaller hole. Same, this is my venison. And you can see in the bottom of the jars, I've got bits of meat that fell off the bone. I waste nothing. I figure, if it's on the bone and it falls off and it's not fat or cartilage, then why waste the meat? So I tend to can it right in with my broth. So here I have set up 4 good-sized soup bones. Now when you do bone broth, you want to use cracked bones, which I don't have to worry about cracking these because these were cut from the butcher shop that we bought them from. Normally though, if it's from a deer or if we have a friend who's butchered a cow lately, we'll sometimes be able to get long bones. Leg and hip bones are really, really great for this. Hi, Lindsay. So we have a bone saw that we keep. That way we can crack the bones ourselves and make sure that we're able to get out all of this marrow. Now the marrow is right here. If you touch it, it's very smooth, kind of gelatinous, but you really want to be able to cook that marrow, and get all the benefits that it has. Now these bones have a lot more meat than most of the soup bones I normally deal with, but that's okay. I'm going to pick the meat and the fat out, and we're going to go ahead and use it. For my vegetables, I've got a heaping pile of garlic. That's the organic garlic we grow ourselves. I have onions, I have celery, and I have carrots. Now, because I waste nothing, let me turn this back around. Because I believe in wasting nothing, if I have vegetables that go soft in the refrigerator in the crisp drawer, like celery, I use it. It doesn't matter if it's wilted because the nutrition's still there. It just means it's losing its life. So use it. Sometimes I'll even, if I'm doing a large processing of an item where I have a lot of scrap material, like onion ends, celery ends, where I wouldn't necessarily keep the frill of the green, I'll freeze it and I'll use it for bone broth. Don't waste a thing. So I encourage that. I encourage you to have as little kitchen waste as possible. So I'm going to turn this back around and just show you how I load my pan. So I'm just going to take my vegetables and kind of move them around. It doesn't really matter what order you do it. You just want the flavors to be well melded. So I already have these all pre-washed and pre-cut. You can see, like, I don't cut off the ends unless it was really brown, like up the rib. I'm not gonna cut it off and waste that vegetable. So you're just gonna go ahead and put it around your meat. And get some onions, and I don't cut the onions in half, I just cut the edges, you know, to peel them. I just want the flavors to be well mingled. There's really no rhyme or reason or anything like that. And then we're just gonna go ahead and carry it over to the oven. You can see my oven's already preheated to 450. I'm gonna stick it in the oven and we're gonna put on a timer. So we're gonna cook that for 30 minutes. And then at the end of 30 minutes, what I'm going to do is divide that between the two stock pots. I'm gonna cover it with as much water as I can. Typically I fill them up right up to the rivets in the pot. I agree, Mark, it really is the best. It has the best flavor. And actually, working with me, you're gonna see that even with fruit, as it ages, the sugars come out and they really are more flavorful. So I will, don't be grossed out now. I will even pare down foods that have mold on them. Some molds are safe, some molds are not, and we will explore that and you will learn for yourself. But for example, when I do peaches, I will pare them off. Unless it's black mold, red, yellow, or orange, we don't waste it. We trim it and we use it. Bruised fruit is almost the best, almost always the best. So you're gonna go ahead and divide that between your two stock pots or your one stock pot, depending on how big of a batch you want to do. These two stock pots here, they will give me about 21 quarts of broth. So once they're divided into there and I put the water in, we're going to go ahead and put it on to simmer. Yeah, they're automatically going to be saved, Courtney, so you can go ahead and you can watch them at any time you want to. So we're going to go ahead and set them to simmer once that's done, and I'll maybe come back live to show you. But they're going to simmer for probably 12 to 24 hours, depending on how dark the broth gets. I like a really nice, rich broth. So let me just show you with my turkey broth as an example. See how you hold it up to light? You can't see light through it? That's because it's so rich. See, this is the venison broth. Same deal. The darker the broth is, the less light you can see through it, the richer it is, the more nutrients are going to be in it. So, and everything that we have roasting in our oven for flavor is going to go into those pots. You can start with frozen bones. It doesn't matter. You might want to increase your roasting time if you choose to do so. I'm also going to be setting up some beef stew later today. And I may go live for that as well, so you guys can get a kind of a glimpse of that. Or I may actually do that tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm going to be canning the bone stock. so that you all can see how that's done and see how a pressure canner works. But sorry, I keep getting notifications, distracting. But yeah, so it's really fairly simple. You just wash your vegetables, trim off anything that's bad ends, brown, I don't use. But you know, it's really, really, really simple. You can use the leaves on the celery. You can use the heads of the carrots if they have green on them. It's not going to matter at all. I even use onions that are starting to sprout. Sometimes I use garlic that's starting to sprout. Those are not going to hurt. They're scallions. So, you know, really take advantage of every part that you can, because you're just adding to the nutrients that you have. So with that, I'm going to let you all go. And if you have any questions, go ahead and comment them, and I will do my best to answer them either in the next live or in type. Okay? Hope you have a great day. Bye-bye. Hey there, we're back. So the vegetables are all roasted, and so are the meat pieces, the bones. You can see how nice and juicy that marrow is. So now we're just gonna put them in our stock pot. And I'm gonna put these two in the biggest one. You can see how nice these veggies browned up. And I'm just going to put about half of everything I have here. And if I don't feel like there's enough, then I may add some more fresh vegetable with it. So that's kind of what it looks like in the pot. I'll switch pots here. Whoops, no, it doesn't want to pick up. You could smell this, it's amazing. It's very hot though. So I recommend you have a good pair of tongs to lift this stuff out with. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and start filling. My son's going to help me fill these pots up. Nate, you want to carry that first one over and start filling it for me? All right, so we have all the meat and veggies in the pots. And I'm actually going to take my pot mitts and see all this juice. Like I said, waste nothing. Pour it right in over. And add a little water. Give that a rinse. Get all the excess juice off. You see how dark that is already? All right. Now we're just going to fill this up. And I'm using hot water just to kind of give it a boost on getting down to business here. I agree, Mark. It does look really good. You could smell it. Oh. And you can already see all the fat at the top of the pan. Now I know a lot of people will only fill it till it covers. No such thing here. We're almost up to the rivets. I'm gonna grab that other pot for me, honey. Now it's really important that we simmer this and not boil, so you want to make sure that the temperature on your oven is set so that you have, you know, soft bubbles, but you don't want to have a full-on rolling boil like you would for boiled eggs or, you know, mashed potatoes or whatever. And this is really, you know, turn it on and, you know, once you have the correct temperature set for the proper boil, you can just set it and forget it. Want to take that one out? Thanks. And while that one's filling, I'll go ahead. Oh, he turned on the stove for me. So every stove has its own sweet spot. This burner tends to be about right here. So, which is medium high. My other burner burns a little hotter, so I'm going to set the temperature on that burner much lower. Look at all that nice fat on the top. This one I'm going to fill a little bit fuller than the other one. Okay. See if I can multitask carrying this. All right. So I'm just going to cover, and that's all there is to setting up your bone broth. So I will see you all tomorrow when it's done. I'll probably check it about midnight, see how it's doing. If I feel like it needs more time, I might put it in the refrigerator overnight and then restart it tomorrow. Doesn't hurt anything for everything to soak overnight. All right, so we'll see you tomorrow and see what the results are. Have a good day. Hey everybody. As promised, I am back live today to show you how to can your beef stock. So I just wanted to show you a few things first, so we can get things going. First of all, let me turn my camera around. I'm going to put my dishwasher back on a rinse cycle so my jars get nice and hot. So pressure canner is on and warming. Now I wanted to point out these little lines inside. I don't know if you can see them with the steam. Hey Howard, let me just wipe my lens here. So if you look down by where the water is, you can see there's a small indent right about there. That is the 3-quart line. And we need our water to be up there, so I'm going to add some more water. just wanted to make sure you guys got to see that line first. Okay, so now we're touching that. Hi, Sarah. So we're up to our 3 quarts. Now, as you can see, I have hard water, so my canner is, you know, moderately stained, but also my canner gets a lot of work done with it. So some water staining is to be expected. But one of the things you can do preventatively to help your canner last longer is to do a vinegar solution. Nathan, would you come hold my phone so I can measure this vinegar? Bear with me 1 minute. I need to get my teenager over here. So we're going to go ahead. Now, the water I added just lowered that temperature a little bit, which in comparison to my stock, you know, there's a significant difference. So the stock was reheated and brought up to a boil. So I need you to just hold my phone here so I can add that vinegar. So we're going to add 2 tablespoons of vinegar. There we go. And then while that's rewarming, I'm just going to go through some of the things we did to prep the kitchen for it. Now, as I mentioned in our initial class, you always want to check your vents, your seals before you can, every single time when you're dealing with a pressure canner. Now, I've already gone ahead and inspected my ring. I took it out, checked for cracks, nicks, worn spots, any dryness. I treat mine fairly regularly with coconut or olive oil, and then I just give it a light wash so it's not too greasy. The other thing you also to make your opening and closing of your canner lid a little bit easier when you lock it is to grease the underneath of these tabs right here. You don't want a lot of grease, you just want a minimal amount just to make it slip really easy. Now, for today's purposes, I'm going to show you how to check your vent with a pipe cleaner. You're just going to go in one side and it will come right out the other. Same deal here. And then there's 3 sides, so you want to do that. And then you can also do it, I'm going to show you from this angle, from the inside straight out the vent. Oh, my pipe cleaner just bent on me. Bear with me. And see, so we know that the vent is clear. You hold it up to light, see that light coming right through. So we know our vents are good. So water's coming up to temp, stock is up to temp. I already have the tools I'm gonna need. My books are out. I've got my lids and rings ready. You always wanna use new rings. Never seal with something that's already been used to seal something else. You want to check your rings, make sure there's no dents because you want even pressure applied. You don't want to over tighten, but you also don't want to under tighten. Over tightening can cause the lids to like almost fold, which will ruin your seal. So just enough tightness that you would do so with your fingers. You know, you don't really want to wrench on it. I've got my funnel. I've got my knife out here to collect the heat from the jar. A spoon from stirring my broth. Bleh. And then I've got my nice big ladle. It's one of my favorites. And then I also have salt. Now I know Laura mentioned yesterday she has to be careful with salt because of sodium. We have somebody in our family who has sodium issues as well. So we're not going to add too much, but salt is really a preference thing. I normally, for stock that I'm going to use multi-purpose like this, I'm going to add a teaspoon per quart. So that helps bring up the acidity. Now, I wanted to show you what the stock leftovers look like. This is what your vegetables will look like. Now, these are spent. There's really nothing you can do. I mean, if your kids want to snack on them or whatever, but they pretty much have no nutritional life left. So typically these get thrown. The meat left from the bones, you can see there's not really any in here. There's just gristle and fat that was left from the bones. But I wanted to show you what the marrow looks like. Yesterday I showed you what the bones look like, and you can see here the bones are pretty hollow. This is some spent marrow here, and it's very smooth. Much, much smoother than what fat is. And you can see this looks kind of red, but if you break it open, again, it's more bleached and white inside. And that's really what you want to go for, because you really want to get all the nutrients out of that marrow. So the dishwasher just stopped its last rinse cycle. I'll rinse my fingers here. So we're going to get going. So I'm going to have my son come over so he can help video. And one other thing. I have a rag that here. One side has some soap on it because I am dealing with something that could have some grease. One side is just plain and wet. So if I find that there's too much grease on the rim, which is not desirable, then I'll go ahead and do a light wipe with the soapy side. Otherwise, I'm just going to use the wet side to give it a wipe off. So you want to make sure you have one of those out as well. So we're going to be dealing with hot jars, hot liquid, and then we're going to put it into a hot canner. So everything wants to be semi-consistent in temperature because we don't want to shock our glass and take any risk of breaks. And see, you can see my dishwasher is good and steamy here. So I'm going to take my first jar and probably a second. Oops. Hey Nate, I'm going to need you to take this phone so I can actually handle my jars without causing any issues. I don't really want to put my fingers in the jars because we want to keep everything as sanitary as possible. So I'm going to slide my stock pot forward. And be careful when you open your stock pot. You don't want to lay your arm on the rim like I just did or get burned by the steam. And the minute you start taking that pot cover off, your temperature is going to start dropping. So you want to try to work fairly quickly. And you can see, if you look in the pan, I've already kind of skimmed the fat off, but there is still some. So I'm just going to give that a light stir. And you can see there are still meat bits in there. And I'm going to go ahead and start ladling that in. And I'm going to turn this so that the heat is dripping on the knife. Nate, can you get right down here and show them how I'm using that knife? I really want the knife to absorb the most of the shock of that heat, just to avoid shocking the glass and breaking it, because it will make one heck of a mess. Now with meat and broth, you only want to fill your jars up to the shoulder because you want to allow some room for expansion. Normally a good 1-inch headspace is good. Where did I put my little hot pad? Oh, it's over here. So I'm going to use this hot pad and I'm going to grab the knife and the funnel and put it into my next jar. I'm just going to slide this one out of the way. And same thing. Give it a good stir. And that liquid is pouring on the knife. You want to be really careful when you're moving the knife because the knife obviously gets extremely hot. And you don't want to take any risk that you are burning yourself. Personally, I don't have any fingerprints, literally. 20 years of canning will do that to you. It's not if you burn yourself, it's when you burn yourself. So make sure your first aid kits are handy. And I use lavender oil. We're going to go grab some more jars. Now these jars were inspected before they went into the dishwasher. You always, no exceptions, want to check your jars for cracks and nicks. Hold them up to the light, make sure they're clean and sterile. You don't want to take any risks with your jars breaking because then your hard work is lost. And again, just going to give that a stir. Pick it up. And we want to focus that pour right onto the knife. Hi, Alicia. And again, just up to the shoulder. Now, I've been doing this a good long time, so I kind of keep a rhythm going. But where you're just starting, for those of you who are just starting, I'd recommend doing one jar at a time. It will increase your back and forth, but it's better to be safe than take too much time that your jars will cool. See, there's a lot of meat in that one. Oops, sorry, not even angled over. All right, we're gonna get some more. Make sure you're always closing. If you use a dishwasher like I am, make sure you're closing it every single time. Oh, I'm not gonna use that one. I don't want to use that one. All right, so. Again, we're just going to move that with this. See how nice and dark that broth is? And move it to the next one. Hi, Em. All right, and then we need one more, and that will finish out our first canner load. Whoops, we don't want to do that. All right, Nate, and I'm going to have you take the camera into another second here so I can start wiping. Okay, and then I'm going to put this over on our spoon rest so it's out of the way. And Nate's going to take over here. So now what I'm going to do is just put a teaspoon. You want to make sure you're using canning salt, otherwise it can cause some cloudiness. And cloudiness could set the idea that maybe you've done something wrong, or maybe you've got a bad batch. So that's really the only reason. I got that on the soapy side. Should check that first. So really see just a finger tight, and then if you want to follow me over to the canner, and then we're just going to put it in. And we just repeat that. You want to make sure you don't have any salt or anything that can interrupt the seal. Now these obviously are near boiling. They were near boiling, and they will be way more than near boiling when they come out of the canner. So we're going to talk about safety as far as when it's time to take them out, the steam and all of that in just a minute. You want to make sure that you only have one lid underneath your ring, primarily because it won't do anything to the seal. The one closest to the jar will still seal, but you won't be able to reuse a lid that was accidentally processed. I would recommend that you use a hot pad or a jar lifter as you do this, especially if you're not used to the heat. Okay, so now we're going to put the lid on our broth after we take this out. I'll put the last jar in. We don't want that getting too cold. Move it back to our hot burner. We're going to put the last jar in, and then we're going to just, try to make sure that there's not too much touching as far as each other. Now, I want to address something that I recently saw. You can see they're pretty well spaced and even. And then I'm going to go ahead and set our lid down and turn it to lock. Now, we're going to turn the stove up to high and wait for it to build enough steam that there's visible or feelable steam coming out of the vent pipe. This pipe may rattle, it may build up some condensation, that's okay. This is not going to go up and stay up until there's enough pressure to make it lock, which won't happen until we put our weight on. This little button up here is going to pop up. It's going to just lift. You're going to be able to see that it's pressurized. That will only come out in the event of an emergency, which prayerfully, God willing, we never have. We've been very blessed that way. I'm just going to clean up my mess here. I like to keep my work surface as clean as possible. That way we don't have any cross-contamination of anything. I'll put my lids back there that are all prepped. Put my lid back on my salt. And so that's pretty much it. I'm going to go ahead and turn this. Excuse me. So that's pretty much it as far as setting up your canner. Now, I've got me a handy dandy stool. So while this is building up steam, I'm going to just kind of sit here and chit chat with you about a few things. I saw online the other day on another canning group that somebody was advocating that if you bought a used canner that did not come with a rack, that it was okay to use something like a hot pad or a kitchen towel as a base, because as we discussed in the first video, you never want your jars touching the bottom of the canner because of shock. That is categorically not true. Think about this for a moment. How many times do you wash and dry something and then go clean the lint trap? That same principle applies to your canner. You have small valves that are easily plugged by minuscule objects. So you never want to create the opportunity for something to plug one of your valves so that the steam or the appropriate amount of steam can escape. So be very diligent that you're not taking shortcuts. If you have something that you want to pressure can and you don't have the proper equipment, then don't do it. Freeze it, borrow an appropriate piece of equipment from a friend or a neighbor, but don't take shortcuts that could end up, in a dangerous situation. There are pictures out there, there are videos out there that show canners, the lids blowing off. It's not a good scene, and it's dangerous. You can get really, really injured or even killed. So please remember, as with all machinery, it's a tool, but if you don't use the tool correctly and appropriately, you could end up injured or injuring somebody else. So there's my piece of that. Now, I always make sure that everything in my kitchen prior to canning is super, super clean. White vinegar is a great way to do it, or bleach if you're so inclined. I'm not opposed to either. I care more about sterility and safety. So make sure your surfaces are sterile, make sure your equipment is sterile, make sure that your products are appropriately heated or cooled as they're required. When you are doing raw packing of vegetables, you can start with a cold canner and you can start with cold vegetables. But when you're dealing with hot liquids like this, you want to make sure that everything is within 10 degrees of each other. Pretty akin to throwing cold water on a hot car in the summer. You just don't do it. So, check this, see if this is, excuse me. So I can just barely feel steam coming out of this right now. And I don't know if you can hear. Can you hear the boiling? So it's starting. I'm going to turn the camera. You can just see the little minuscule amounts of steam and splatter that are coming out. I'd like to see a more consistent steam before I'll turn my timer on. Another thing that is essential is a good timer. I'm lucky I have one on my stove. I have one on my microwave. So once I have a consistent steam, then we'll go ahead and set the timer for 10 minutes so that can vent. Now, because we're doing quarts, we're going to do 25 minutes. Yes. 25 minutes at 11 pounds pressure. Oh, good. I'm glad. And you'll hear that even when your weight is on. You should be able to hear that bubbling. Let's talk about jar breakage, because it can happen even if you take all of the right steps. It is possible to miss a hairline chip or the teeniest, I just said that backwards. The teeniest of chips and the hairline crack. It could be on the seam. It could be on where the manufacturer cuts the glass at the bottom of the jar. Sometimes you can miss things there. When a jar breaks in a canner, I always recommend, if it's water bath, I'll let it go. I'll be honest. Recommendations are, though, that you do stop what you're doing and restart, and you want to reprocess the whole load. You don't have to change the lids, but you want to move efficiently and get it up there and get it done. I do change the lids just because I work too hard on what I do and for the amounts that I do to take any risk that I'm going to have a batch of anything be bad. I would rather waste the few dollars in the lids than take any risk. No amount of money is worth the safety and the health of my family. Excuse me. So that's one thing I just don't play with. When it comes to safety, I don't play. If I think something looks off or smells off or sounds off, we just don't mess with it. Oh, oops. You can see the steam? It's a little bit more consistent now. So that's enough of a steam right there. Then I'm going to go ahead and put on my timer for 10 minutes. You want to vent your pot for 10 minutes before you apply your weight. Now I know the majority of you are not watching this live. Those of you that are watching live, would you rather me disconnect and then come back when we're done, or let me know what your preferences are, please. If you have any questions, we can answer questions right now too. We can use that time then. In 10 minutes though, when that's done venting, I'll apply the weight and then we'll bring it up to temperature, and then I'll adjust the temperature throughout. So maybe I should stay on. That way you guys can see how to adjust the stove. Every stove has a sweet spot. So we'll go over that, so you'll learn what your own stove sweet spot is, and basically how the process is for that. But going back to jar breakage, if I break something in my pressure canner, I always stop. It's not worth taking the risk of having a bit go up into the vent pipe. And when you think about it, for the pressure to build up and things to be boiling and the steam producing, you know, it's pretty easy for something to be picked up and sucked up into that vent because it's doing its job. So you can see the steam? And that straight line up to the microwave. So, yeah, so anybody have any questions so far? All right, I'm going to take that as no. How do you know something broke? You can hear it. It sounds like a cross between a suction cup, a large suction cup being released, and glass clanking together. Kind of makes it like a pop noise. Later on, I'll try to post a demographic that shows you how you can diagnose the breakage and why you had a jar break, because depending on how the jar breaks, it will tell you whether it was because of shock, whether it was because there was damage to the glass, or whether because there was something else wrong, whether it got dinged or whatever. So I want to show you this. You can see there's some steam starting to escape here every now and then. See how there's water built up right there? And that's hot. I don't recommend that. So that's completely normal. Don't worry about that. We get about 6.5 minutes. And you want to make sure that if you have something that breaks, use equipment, because you're not dealing with regular heat, you're dealing with pressurized heat. So the things are going to be much, much hotter. So a slotted spoon, tongs. Like I said yesterday, I recommend everybody have tongs. Oh, back button is now. Maybe I need to go this angle. See, you can see that little bit of steam escape. And that again is perfectly normal. Hear it? So it's getting good and hot now. So about 5 minutes left. So any other questions? How many of you have canners already? Have you invested in one, or are you still looking? It's getting louder and louder. No, And I'll tell you this, I've seen mixed things with people saying that Instant Pots are supposed to be canned with. I have not seen anything that says that. If the manufacturer says it, I suppose, but I don't know that I would necessarily trust it. I think Instapots are too new. And I think Instapots, I don't know. I'm not comfortable with Instapots yet. I don't have one personally. I've seen too many malfunctions where people have been injured. So I think I'm going to wait and give it some time. They certainly look, you know, I saw one that does rotisserie and air frying and then pressure cooking and allegedly canning. But until I see some evidence of that, it's not something I would take the time to invest in. Just want to turn this again. Sarah, I love the idea of the All-American. That will be my next investment because if you get the same model that I've been looking at, and I don't know the number off the top of my head, but you can do 2 tiers of quart jars, which you're talking 14 quarts at a time, and talk about a time saver. So that is very appealing to me. We bought this house as investment. It was a rental prior, so we are in the midst of projects everywhere. Our floor is next to be replaced because the linoleum has tears all through it. Oh, and now the lock lifted. So it's building good steam. We're almost there. And that's how you know when your canner is locked. It's that little button that went up. Yeah, it's about $200, I think, the one I looked at. But it's well worth it. My canner cost me, I got it on sale, and then because I knew the store manager, and it was the only one that had been there, I don't know, it had been there all summer. I had been eyeing it. So I talked him into giving me an additional discount rather than it sitting on the shelf. And he was happy to oblige because we know each other personally. But my canner was like $89. But I would spend $200 for one that I could do 2 tiers with. My next water bath, I have 2 water bath canners. One's a 7 quart and one's a 9 quart. And I recently found there is a rectangular Amish made stainless steel canner for water bath that does, I want to say it's 18 quarts at a time. And it was like $200, but boy, oh howdy. Once I have my stove upgraded to a gas stove, that is on my purchase list. So one thing at a time. Me too. I am loving steals of deals. So we're about 1:30 from adding our weight. Just gonna clean up some of the moisture on this. You never really want to push that down, so try not to. And you don't have to clean up the moisture. It's just my own personal preference. So now once we put the weight on, you can see the dial on my stove. We're on high. I don't know if that will focus back there. There you go. And so once we start to build pressure, I'm going to wait till it gets to probably the 10 before I even touch the temperature on my stove, because I want to let it build efficiently. I don't want it to overpressurize or overheat, but I definitely want to give it adequate time to get up to temperature. When I start turning this down, one thing I've noticed with my stove, with this canner, and of course everybody's combination is going to be slightly different, is when I start turning it down, if I go to a degree before what I want, which is 11 pounds, which is this second dark line here, I can start turning the temperature down without risking dropping the pressure. And that's something you want to be very aware of. We got 3 seconds. So timer's off. And we're going to go ahead and add the weight. And now it's just a matter of watching the gauge. So, and we'll notice probably 201. So probably by 206, we're going to be probably close to 5 pounds, I'm guessing. So it can take a few minutes. So yeah, but I'm definitely going to be investing in both the All-American and that Amish water bath. Now I do, like I said before, a ridiculous amount. I can probably over 2,000 jars a year. We do not do anything small. We have fruit trees, we have strawberries, garlic. We grow pretty much all of our own produce. This year, how many quarts of grapes did we do, Nathan? I think we had, I want to say I had 52 2-quarts of grapes, which we did juice and jelly out of. We don't really have too much that we buy elsewhere otherwise than citrus products that we can't grow in Maine. And because I ran out of space, we got a lot of greens with our beets last year, but we didn't get a lot of bulbs to the beets. Well, Nathan, can you come watch the canner for a minute and I'll show this nice lady where I store all my cans? Go ahead. Baxter, you want to move that way? Sorry, I gotta get the dog to move. So my daughter's bedroom, we have converted to a pantry. She is grown and out, but let me see. All of those are jars that are either empty. Actually, no, all of those are jars. And you can see I've got the little green labels on the outsides telling me what's what. So my husband gets up there with a ladder and is very kind to bless me with his services. Of course, it helps that my son is 6 foot something, and you know, he can help his dad do what we need to do. So yeah. Previous to that, we have a shed outside, and I had to store them outside, which is a pain because every year you have to, what? Yes, you can have some. Sorry, they're asking for snacks. So we're at like 2.5 pounds of pressure right now. Nathan, this could be dumped if you wanted to. That would be great. Thank you. Excuse me as I check my water. Oh, so did you see the little bit of moisture coming out from under the weight? That is completely normal. Just the canner doing its thing, you can see. And there's our pressure gauge, and it's continuing to climb. And then I also have, excuse me, I have 2 huge 40-gallon buckets that I keep my rings in. I have one for smallmouth, one for largemouth. And I keep them on a string, or I should say on a laundry line that has been sterilized. And I keep them all together. So then I just pick up the end of the string, take off what I want, reknot it, and we go from there. It has made life so much more convenient. When I know I'm going to be canning or during canning season, pretty much the dishwasher becomes home base for jars that will be used. I have 2 racks in my dishwasher. What I do is first wash of the season, you know, when they're coming out of the loft, I always run them through a sterile wash first, which takes about 2 hours with the heated dry. and then I'll put them on a hot rinse, and I'll continue to do that. So it does take some prep work ahead to make sure your surfaces are sanitary, your jars are prepped, but preparation will save you time in the long run. When I first started canning, I would get so flustered because I am not somebody who likes to waste time. I like to do it and get it done and be done with it. So it was very frustrating for something like this to take me hours and hours to do. But now that I've become, more in tune with what I'm doing, it's just become a more efficient process. If I felt my stove was more reliable, I would run 2 pressure canners at a time, but this stove is not too old, but older. So, and it doesn't have 2 large burners in the front. It has one in the back, which touches the knobs. So the setup is poor. At our old house, we had a nice wide 5-burner gas stove. So it was very easy for me to have 2 or 3 things going at once in large pots. If you don't already have stainless steel pots, my recommendation is to see what you can find either at Goodwill or even at yard sales, auctions. Auctions are great places to find things because a lot of times auctions have items that were cleared out of houses. Hi, Katie. Thanks for joining. Hi, Nathan. That's my son. He thinks he's being sneaky. So they're great places to find canners, jars. I've gotten a large amount of my jars from auctions. Now those jars are only my regular screw top jars. I also have an entire stash of antique jars with the rubber band and the latch tops. And those are still usable. And if you guys are interested, I can teach you guys how to use those if you have them. I even have the medicinal size, so they're the little teeny weeny jars, which I use to make salves and balms because we do a lot of our own herbal stuff here. My goal is to be as self-sufficient as possible, which in times like now come in extremely handy. I know a lot of people are just getting into this because they're suddenly concerned. We've always lived with the idea of if not now, when? So better to be prepared. All of my kids have grown up canning. So, I just think it's a great skill for everybody to have. So let me check our gauge. So we're up to 8 and it's 2:09. So we've been pressurizing for about 8 minutes. So it doesn't take too much time. So when it gets up to 10, and actually I might even let it get to 11, that's when I'll start pulling down the temperature on the burner. And like I said, every stove has a sweet spot where it will maintain the pressure with the least amount of heat. And that's really what you want. You want to build up your pressure fast, but then you want to start slowly reducing your heat where you can keep the pressure consistent without going too high, but without it dropping. When my canner gets to be 14 pounds, it rocks. That doesn't make me comfortable. So unless it's something where I need to have it rocking, I prefer that it don't or that it not. So, really I try to keep it between 11 and 12. More pressure won't hurt anything, but less pressure will. If your pressure drops below your ideal pressure at 11 pounds for stock, you have to restart your timer. So if we get up to 11 pounds of pressure and I put my timer on for 25 minutes and at 18 minutes it drops to 9, we have to restart the timer and build up the pressure back up to the 11 pounds. Some people will try to take shortcuts and say, no, it doesn't matter. It absolutely does. The times given on these are there for the science that it stands for. That just did not make any sense at all. The times that exist per the pounds of pressure are what are required to kill the bacteria meant to make these shelf stable. So, and that's their goal. We want to have shelf stable items that will last a good year, if not 2. So we are at just about 9. 8.5, close to 10. So we're almost there. I'm just gonna hang out right here for a minute because it won't be but another minute or so. You want to make sure when you're reading your gauge that you're kind of face on, because if you look from this angle, it looks like we're already at 11. And if you look at this angle, it looks like we're not even at 10. So try to get a face on reading. So if you ever hear somebody tell you, oh, well, I had this and it dropped down to 9, and then I just didn't bother, and within a couple minutes it was back up, it's okay. Don't go by that, because luck is not science. Science is something that you can reproduce and get the same results consistently every single time. Luck does not do that. And it's really, really important that you remember that botulism is odorless, tasteless, colorless. It won't necessarily produce a mold or any type of spore that you can visually see or smell. Okay, so we're at 11. So we're going to go ahead and put our timer on for 25 minutes. And so now the goal is to keep that above 11. So I'm actually going to let it get up to 12 before I turn it down, just so I can give you guys a good, solid understanding of this. Now it's also important to remember, because I have friends in other states and I don't know what states you all are, who's in this group. If you live in an area where you are above sea level, your pressure will remain the same, I think, but your time may be longer. Let me see. I'm going to go back here so I can explain this better. You hear that little bit of hiss? It's completely normal. Don't worry about it. It can be unnerving though when you first start. So I just want to show you guys this in this book. So here are some adjustments. See, the higher your altitude is, the more pressure you're going to require. Processing time is the same, but your pressure required is going to increase. Oh, so we are quickly up to 13. So now we're going to start dropping this back. And I'm just going to do about a quarter of a turn, or half of a quarter of a turn, an eighth of a turn at a time. You see how the needle's slowly falling back a little bit? And that's what we want. We just want it to fall back a little bit so it's not getting too pressurized. Oh. Did I lose you? Nate, can you still see me? Are you still on the live? My phone said trying to reconnect. Is everybody still here? Okay. Thank you, Sarah. So a little bit of a process here. So Sarah, have you ever canned before? Or Katie, or anybody else who's watching? I just moved that and dropped it down a little bit more, just a hair. I was feeling like a real nerd when I first started doing this because it's almost like talking to yourself if you don't have somebody responding. Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad it's helping. It used to scare the bejeepers out of me too. It's very intimidating, especially because of all of the stuff you see. But if it's done properly, it's a great asset. So we're still a little bit below the 3/4 mark. And we're maintaining 12 pounds. Let's see. So now we're almost at the space where my stove sweet spot is. It's typically a little bit closer to the medium heat line. But we're doing well to maintain 12 as long as we don't reduce more than that. What kind of things have you canned before, Sarah? What are you doing? So this is pretty much it. Tomatoes and jam. Those are good. Emily Nickerson, she's in this group. She does tomato jams with Jell-O, like the colored flavored Jell-O. So, if anybody's interested, I hear ya. We have 2 freezers outside, and then we have a little one inside that recently died, so we're only using the 2 outside now. But we had one that was just full of berries and fruit that we had processed and greens and things like that. But we found that because it was out in the shed that we weren't using it like we ought to have been. So some of the stuff ended up with freezer burn, and I hate wasting. So we moved to doing a lot more just by canning. Is there anything in particular that you want to learn how to can? Yeah, meat is the one thing that takes the longest, meats and beans. Well, greens take 90 minutes, so I guess meats and greens and beans. I'm thinking I was going to try to have beef stew made for today, but due to a snafu on my end, I wasn't able to get that done so that we could can that as well. So I think this will be it for today, but I won't keep you all on here while I do the whole thing, but I'm guessing 21 plus quarts. So, and this is kind of doing meat. There are meat bits, not a lot of meat, but ample amount. So we're at 16 minutes, and we're still maintaining a consistent pressure. This is really the only stinky thing about pressure canning is you cannot leave your kitchen. Or let me rephrase that. You should not leave your kitchen without somebody else standing guard because you don't want to take any risks. Whereas in a water bath, you can go watch TV until it's done or whatever. So we are maintaining 12 pounds. It's like we've just crept up a teeniest bit, so I'm going to go ahead and drop this down a little bit more. And as long as we don't go lower than that 11, we're good. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. Do you garden yourself, Sarah, or do you buy your produce? I'm not. I'm using a large burner. I don't know if you can see underneath there. There, I guess that's the best view you're going to get. So, large burner. And then you can see the lip of the canner. You want to try to make sure that that's centered. I didn't do a very great job on that, but my stove kind of sets cockeyed. So I have to position the canner just so, because you want the canner to be even so that the pressure gauge isn't misreading, so there's not more pressure on one side than the other. So I don't typically use my small burners to can anything, except for when I'm using my ginormous water bath. That one does 9 quarts at a time, but that one is so big that it overlaps so much that I have to use 2 burners. So I use the front and the back burner and put them both on. Yeah, I'm lucky. Well, I shouldn't say I'm lucky, but I'm blessed. My husband's a landscaper. So when you have a professional gardener, it's nice. He's very helpful with making sure the weeds are down. And of course, the boys and I do what we can. But he's really amazing. The yard would not be what it is. We have some arbors that he built me last year that we grew our cucumbers and our squashes on, and they did fabulous, which made picking them so much nicer. They stayed really nice and clean because they weren't on the ground. There was no ground rot from them setting down from moisture. Yeah, so that's awesome. So we're kind of lucky that way. Yeah, so we're staying consistent. We've got 13 minutes left. Now, when this is done, you want to remove the canner from the heat immediately, but you don't want to jostle it. You don't want to take any chances of dropping it. So what I do right here is I'll put this trivet here. So I only have to lift from here to there. Try not to scrape your, canner across to the next burner, because these burners will dig the bottom and damage your canner, which is not something that's ideal. But you want to get it off the heat and you want it to start cooling as rapidly as possible. You never want to take off your weight though, because it can cause instability in the jars, which will cause you to lose liquid in the jars. It can cause food to go up under the seal and ruin your seal. So you really want to do your best to make sure that it's stable at all times. It takes about, well, depending on the day and depending on how cool it is in the house. I've got a couple windows open, so hopefully it won't take that long, probably 20 to 30 minutes. So I probably will go once that's off the burner, and then maybe come back on to show you about venting. Once it's set and the gauge reads 0, then you can go ahead and take off your weight, let it depressurize and remove the steam for another 10 minutes. Excuse me. And then you can go ahead and open the top. When you unlock your canner, you always want to make sure that you're lifting towards the rear, never towards you. Now, you also want to make sure you have something on your feet. First rule. Because when you're obviously tilting a lid that has steam, you're going to have a lot of moisture beads up underneath that lid. So when you roll it towards you, little beads of hot water can come out, boiling water can come out and get on your feet and burn your feet. So I recommend you wear shoes to protect your feet. You know, make sure, like I said, you have first aid nearby, or you can easily get to your sink to rinse if you get burned. I've been burned more times than I can count. And when I was making the remark about having no fingerprints, that is literal. I literally have none. I worked in banking for a long time. The FBI had to come in and do a special computerized reader. I didn't have any prints for that. I literally have 1.5 fingers that actually have a semi-readable print. So they're pretty smooth. I don't know if you can you really even see that? No. But, so yeah. I don't have any fingerprints. So, and I have burned probably every orifice you can. I've burnt my face, I've burnt my stomach, I've burnt my arms, my feet, which is why the shoe recommendation comes in. So yeah. So, we've got about 9.5 minutes left. So what kind of farm does your husband work at? Is he dairy or potatoes or? Oh, oh, do you sell it? I'm very interested in this. Are they meat chickens or egg chickens? Well, not that meat chickens don't lay eggs, but definitely you should. I would line up. I would definitely line up. Like I had said in our initial video, we grow majority of all of our own produce, but I am allergic to birds. We had a farm for a number of years, and we process all of our own meat. So we may even get into doing some butchering here. But one of my favorite things to do. Okay, if you're an animal lover, mute me right now. I'll wave at you when you want to put the sound back on. When we would process the birds, it amazed me that after they were decapitated, they would still caw when you were removing the innards. I know, small things and you small minds. I can do both. From raising them to putting them in, but I am allergic to bird dander. And after, I don't know, countless times that we grew and butchered our own turkeys and chickens, every single time I would catch bronchitis or pneumonia. So my doctor advised us not to grow any more birds. So we stopped growing birds. But I love them. So we're still good on we got a little bit more than 6.5 minutes, and we're still at 11. See, you get it. My kids, they used to think, Mom, you're crazy. But we've butchered goats, we've done cows, we've done deer. I am that girl that brought home a deer in the back of the van. Somebody hit it on the road and they weren't going to take it. And the warden, or not the warden, but the sheriff was like, no, we're not going to do anything with it. I'm like, I'll take it. So we had deer steak that night. But my husband's like, you have what in the back of the van? But I don't think it's strange at all. I think it's wise. You know, if you looked at 40 years ago, majority of people knew how to do these things. I'm huge for kids learning lost arts, and I think butchering, hunting, foraging, herbals, canning, those are all lost arts. Knitting, weaving, sewing, we do it all. And I think everybody needs to, you know how to do these things because, you know, times like now, who's going to see, you can see my knitting knot up there. It's like a little windmill. But yeah, you need to know how to do these things. So we make our own tinctures and, you know, medications. Well, I shouldn't have said medications because that implies some type of pharmaceutical twist. I do crochet. Yep. I've been crocheting since I was, oh goodness, my mother taught me when I was 4, a little bit, maybe a little bit earlier than that. I had cancer. I had acute lymphocytic leukemia. So I was not allowed to go outside or play with other kids or things like that. So my mom occupied me with teaching me how to knit and crochet and do needlepoint and cross stitch. And she taught me all of those things. And so those were my jam. It's probably why I love, you know, I always tell people I was born in the wrong era. I should have been like Little House on the Prairie times. She was a very good mom. I'm very blessed. You know, and it was a lot for her to do considering the circumstances. So, got 4 minutes. So, yeah, I feel very blessed to know all that I know. I've taught myself how to sew and I taught myself how to weave. But I love it all. So, Sarah, now forgive me because like I said, there's a lot of people in this group. I don't know where everybody lives. Are you local? Are you in Maine? Oh, so my sister-in-law lives up in Etna, so you're not too far from her. We're down in Belfast. Three minutes. It is. It's a bit liberal as far as some of the stuff that, you know, but to each his own. But I love it. We've lived in Maine. Well, my husband's been born and raised here, but I've lived in Maine since I was about 11. So, and I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. I'm quite pleased with living by the ocean, and I can't. We tried to go to Florida for a little bit, but we wintered in Florida one year, and it just wasn't my thing. The heat was just too much, and where we were, but we were kind of over on the West Coast, so we didn't have quite the same ocean breeze as what I'm accustomed to. But I was sick with allergies and asthma the whole time. So, but yeah. We got 2 minutes. Thank you for sticking with me this whole time, Sarah. My boys are being so quiet. It's so unusual. I'm glad. I think I have a pumpkin here that it's still nice and healthy. I know everybody looks at the spots on it and says, oh, there's something wrong with your pumpkin. It's a little bit of a funky pumpkin. Excuse my bones. I didn't throw those away yet. You can see the spots. But it's just the variety of pumpkin it is. So I need to make pie with it. So we're going to be beeping here in about a minute. Hey, Nate. I'm amazed my kids have been this quiet, honestly. Hi, Liz. They're not normally this quiet at all.
No, we are not.
Yes, I am going to can pumpkin. You cannot puree it and can it, but you can it in 1-inch cubes. So that is about to beep, and I want to be able to film it being moved. So would you mind lifting it for me? So this is my assistant, Nate. He's going to hide from the camera. Here, let me have that vinegar. Just move it right on the island. You want to move that pipe cleaner and that water jar? It's not dirty. I just had water in it. Okay, so let's lift that right off. Make sure you keep it nice and even. Well, he's so big, he blocks everything. He's my giant. So there we go. So we're going to let this drop down, and we're not going to touch any of the gaskets or the lock or this, because like I said, we don't want to disrupt the jars in there. And once this gauge is down, can you see that little silver knob right there? Once that's down, then we will remove the weight. We'll let it depressurize and steam for 10 minutes, and then we'll open the lid. I'll probably come back live when we do that. That way people can learn how to do it safely. I'm probably going to put a towel here to catch any steam drips or water drips that come out, to protect it from rolling down, because my feet are barefoot. I'm breaking my own rule. You want to make sure you have a pot mitt when you're going to take this weight off, because it is just as hot as, or portions of it are just as hot as what's inside. So, and you can see the pressure's already starting to drop. So it's always the last few pounds that seem to take the longest. So that is pretty much it. So once because I have this broth left, and then I have some more that I already boiled. Hi, Alicia. Here, which as you can see is still hot. I'm going to dump this into that other one, actually. So once the canner is depressurized and those jars are out, then I will start the process all over again. So I think I'm probably going to end up with more than 21 quarts. Normally it's just 21 quarts. Oh, this one. I'm going to go ahead and turn that back on so this gets boiling hot again, because this water in the canner is going to still be pretty hot. I don't want it touching my knob. So I want that to get up to a boil again. So yeah. So stove's off, this burner's on now. I'll wipe this where I dripped some stuff. Keep my surface clean. And rip my earbud out of my ear. Hang up my trivet. And see, you can see the steam dripping out of there. And we're already down to almost 8 pounds. So yeah. So once I have the canner empty, I'm going to get out my jar lifters. Once the canner is empty and back on to reheat, then I will go ahead and reload the canner. So if you guys have any questions between that, you can go ahead and comment them and I'll try to answer. And hi, Alicia. And probably won't keep live going while I do the rest of these batches because I've got probably, I'm guessing 2 or 3 more to do. So then when I take these out, we'll talk about the jar setting and stuff like that. So we'll be back probably, I'm guessing 20 to 30 minutes. All right. Well, I'll talk to you soon. Okay, so our timer is going off. And it's now time to open our canner and take out our jar. So I'm going to have my son hold the phone. So you're going to give this a twist to unlock it. And you want to open towards the back to let that steam escape. Just kind of hold it there for a second. And you see how that drips forward? Did you get those drips? So, and we're going to move this to the side. Grab our jar lifters. Now, I'm rather close to my cabinet here, so I'm going to be very careful not to bump. Look how dark that is. Beautiful. And we're going to set it down on the towel. Now, once you take your jars out, you're going to want them to rest for 24 hours undisturbed. 24. Really, really important. Oh, did you hear that? They're already starting to pop, which is good. I already have a towel here double layered. You don't want them touching, but you want to have them back to where they're resting comfortably. Not really comfortably, you get it. Okay. So then we're going to recenter the canner on the burner. And you can see, if you look inside here, down at that water line, you can see it right here. Oh, if the steam doesn't steam up my lens. See if I can get a better angle. See right there? You can just see that little dimple. So the water line is a little bit below. So we're going to add some hot water because we don't want to warp the metal of the canner. Once the faucet water is hot, and I'm going to turn my dishwasher back on rinse cycle. Get those jars back up to temp. And there we go. It's up to the line. All right. So now I'm just going to turn the burner back on, get the pot heating back up. My broth is already adequately hot. So I'm going to turn that down. Oh, another jar just pinged. So I want that to stay warm. So it's probably going to take maybe 5-10 minutes for the water to get back up to temperature. And then we will set another batch in. And that's how you do bone broth. So like I said, the jar's here. They're going to rest. You don't want to touch the tops because you don't want to disturb the seals. And you can see this one's right here. You can see the dimple. That one's not sucked down yet. That one's not. That one is. That one is. That one's not. So you'll be hearing these ping, 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 and it is completely normal I don't see any of my jars moving. Oh, another one moving right now, but a lot of times you'll see things boiling still inside the jar. That is completely normal to see movement and to see it rumbling. Don't ever be worried about that. Okay, so this has just been cooling long enough that it has settled a bit, but every now and then you can see it. It'll bubble up and throw up some of the meat bits that are at the bottom. So that completes today's lesson. I've got 3 more loads to do, so I am going to get busy. And I hope you guys have a great day. And thank you for joining me. And if you have any questions, please be sure to comment, or you can even post individually if you have questions. And I'll try to do my best to get back to you as soon as possible. Have a great day.